Right, well I was contacted by Dinah and Andrew back in 2014 just about a potential project out here on Marathon. Initially just to get a group of artists together to come out and spend time on the site. A lot of it was based on research I was doing on another property called Oakdean. And that involved a lot of site engagement over time to be on the property. So Diana approached me to see if I was interested, and of course I was. So from there we started to think about what this project might look like, who might be involved. We really wanted it to tie into work being done by the Tasmanian Land Conservancy, and just get people together, a bunch of creatives to spend some time here over two occasions. And just start a dialogue really around restoration ecology, land management, land use, history and future.
This is John's tent, which I've never used. I blithely said to him, "Oh, I'll be able to figure it out."
Not a good job.
It's too hard. And I may be doing it totally wrong, but it's looking like a tent.
Okay, well we've had a video artist, we've had writers, myself kind of cross-discipline or multimedia artists. We've got some sculptors out here this time around, we have a restoration ecologist from Greening Australia here, and researchers as well, so people that don't necessarily make art but certainly engage with creative ideas and creative thinking and researching the history of the place.
I think the thing I came away with the most from the first visit was just an amazement at how everyone interacted differently with the environment. Everyone came to it from a very different perspective and saw very different things, and I think the fact that this is a working property and the owners have been here for generations, they were able to give us so much insight and answer so many questions that enabled us to go off on different tangents. Obviously everyone's direction is influenced by their previous work or the things that interest them, and so I explored a couple of different ideas while I was here the first time. I was really taken by all of the dead wood that had been left up in the conservation area and how it was visually it was beautiful, but also really interested to hear what Tanya had to say about the ecology, about how that environment, which we tend to know of as being important to animals, but how important that is for the regeneration, those little pools of moisture that can be generated underneath the dead wood and allow for the plants to regenerate. We know about fire having that function, but I hadn't realised the importance of the dead wood, and what looks like a mess actually is really important. I also got interested in the lines in the landscape, and so took some photographs of that because lines tend to stand out to me, and I do some line drawing exercises on that. And I also collected some clay while I was here that I've done some experimentation with, and I've decided that that's what I'll go with.
Yeah.
I don't know how anything grows in it. It's so tight. I mean, their roots are down, so that's their roots that you're struggling with there.
Yeah. Do the seed just flower?
They have a seed. Yeah, they have a seed head. Yeah.
Yep.
They do.
But they're not as dramatic as that.
Kind of, yeah. I'm just thinking by comparison with like
Yeah, if you take that home and put it down.
sort of the prairies and sort of the fad for
What do you want to
prairie
grow
style
them out? See
plantings,
if
and whether you could do that with.
Yeah, I was talking with Tanya earlier about how I noticed when I had wet some of that clay that I took home and then had left it, and then there was a little thing sprouting, and I don't know what it was. I didn't look after it. But so I was thinking, is that a possibility to incorporate into the work, this idea water,
Yeah.
incorporating
Water,
water in the
seed plant,
work
yeah.
and having it actually.
I've been farming here for 35, 30, 37 years now. Yeah, and it's really easy to muck up things. That's what I've found, and so to make mistakes and make things actually worse than what they were, and that's the honest truth. That's what I think about. That's just my own experience,
right.
And so if I can, I suppose that bush like that's up there, that part of up in there, I'm not interfering with it anymore, and that's I've pulled I put a covenant on it in 2005, up until about 2011. I used to run sheep on it still. I'm allowed to run sheep on it as a covenant, but actually the economics of growing wool's changed, and now I grow meat rather than wool, and so it's allowed me not to run sheep up in that sort of country, and I'm really pleased about that. That there's one other place that I'm not stuffing up.
And it's nice to see that Andrew in particular has conceptualises this as this bigger thing. It's not just Midlands, it's not just a corridor, it's not just 4, 5, 6 landowners, but it has this potential, and is being shown to be also an economically not necessarily profitable, but certainly viable way of thinking, and one that may in fact be the only way that will happen eventually.
They're now doing a whole lot of research looking into different types of animals and what sort of structures or what sort of habitat they need to survive and how they move around.
Right.
So, and to see how we can make sure that our plantings have all those different elements, so that it is actually a successful habitat recreation rather than just having trees in paddocks that may not necessarily provide. Oh, I know how to open this one, Andrew.
Okay, this is your intelligence test, isn't it? But can you put it back together?
No, well, I haven't seen that process.
I think a lot of it's coming together now, like it's like the second visit, like
Yes.
it's the where it's like almost like you kind of like the first visit here, you sort of stir up the water a bit, like, and everything it's really muddy, and you wouldn't have a clue really what you're doing, and you just sort of wandering around right at the last minute, like on the last day of the first visit was when I actually felt like I wanted to make something, or like sort of touch and feel and leave something for the landscape to kind of play with while I was away. And then like as it would happen, I lost all sort of my documentation of that, like my digital documentation, and but that's actually a good thing, because I've come to the second this second trip, and it's everything's like the water's settled, like all the the debris settled, and a lot clearer, like, and you're just taking the experience the first time, so like it's a layers being created already.
Well, the idea of having a trip out here in the summer and a trip out here in the winter was to look at contrast in the landscape and to see the change and try to bring light, I guess, to the fact that it is such a changeable and dynamic landscape. A prime example of that initially is the Marathon Creek, which runs through this property. On the first outing it was completely dry, and of course we come out this weekend and it's flowing and it's just so beautiful. Completely changes everything. Just the amount of birds I've seen, and as the environment changes, so does everything else, and that's great to see. I guess for me it's about responding to the site. Look, I think it will turn into some image-based work, some text-based work, and really the whole purpose of this is to curate a show, to bring together everything that everyone's doing out here, and kind of have a bit of an overview, a bit of a map about possibilities. So, yeah.
The Midlands is about 640,000 hectares. This property is 3,500 hectares. About a third of the Midlands is still bush. about 200,000 hectares is still bush in reasonable condition. That's recoverable, and so this 3,000 hectares is it's 3,000 acres, so it's about 1,000 hectares. So this 1,000 hectares is 0.5% of the bush that's left in the Midlands that we'd hope should be that can be retained, because I think the Midlands is a bit different. People see it as a sort of as a semi-wild land farming landscape. They see it. It's not just pretty farms and it's got this sort of rangeland type feel about it in certain parts. And I think that's what if we lose those 200,000 hectares, it'll turn into a different place. I don't think it'd be very pleasant. I mean, probably a bit like, it wouldn't be like the Wimmera, but we don't want it to be like the Wimmera. So,
I came out the first time looking at things like watercourses and this sort of thing, which are the things that drastically changed on properties, having recently come off one where somebody had gone through with a bulldozer and created a new one in a very inconvenient spot, and then finding out that a similar thing had actually in fact happened here. So that was fascinating because of the actual evidence just in grass colour and that sort of thing, so you get lovely patternings. And in tree growth, the introduced trees compared to the local endemic species. Then you get over here to where the cottage is, and which Dana showed us last time, under masses and masses of galloping non-native trees, and now you've got this whole there's a European story there, which is in fact almost as well composted as anything else, and it's funny to get that as the Europeans' history made much more physical. When it was just a pile of stones last time, it was that was where the cottage was, and now we can see, we're looking at things, we're trying to find rooms, we're trying to find fireplaces, we're looking at pictures, we're doing that sort of thing. So again, it's making it's about the only concrete thing that you've got, because up in the paddocks, eventually things get overtaken, get overlaid and things. But here you've got this thing which still sits there, and it's a very, very odd one, and you think how far back it is, and what was the land like around it?
Where I'm starting to understand a bit more of the science behind, or the scientific outcomes that have occurred on here as a result of intervention and as a result of just the way that these environments evolve organically anyway. So the clay that I've been collecting is it's called black cracking clay, and it occurs right through this whole plain through here, which is sort of an area between the creeks and the hills. And Andrew's been giving us some insight into how that soil in itself has evolved over the years, partly through his own intervention, and the amount of foliage that is left or has disappeared as a result of what he's done, and as a result of it being a grazing area. And so I'm hoping to look more deeply at the whole the whole process of how soils, and particularly clays, being a ceramicist, how they are formed, and the different environmental impacts upon that. And also water is the other thing that the movement of water is an integral part of that process. So I'm hoping to incorporate a sense of that, at least, as water is playing a part in the process. And so from a conservation point of view, I've chosen to look at the soil rather than say the trees that might be a more obvious, or may have been my first instinct as to where the potential area of interest might be.
Oh well, that was nice. Guess what? The flowers are nice.
You're one of the privileged few.
Well, he said it's so long.
I don't just own a bit of a landscape. I own a whole spur that has a creek system on either side of it and a valley floor on either side of it. So it's quite it's an integral component. It's a a contained. It's not quite a catchment, but it's a contained component of the landscape that, if it was better managed, I think has a benefit to water quality and water flow, and they're difficult to measure these days, but if you duplicate that around all the foothills of the Midlands, then you would see a difference.
It's a really exciting time, and it's also a funny full circle because I have been watching that happen, like that movement, for the last 12 years of my life. So it's sort of that appreciation of I guess grassy woodlands basically, and it's sort of, and I just think it's such a interesting texture of landscape as well, and it's just really nice to see that being acknowledged, for all of its values.
Yeah, look, I think it's really interesting. There is so much of the Midlands territory. Of course, this is on the fringe of that as well here in Tasmania. There is so much of it that's privately owned, and it's such beautiful land. And I think the more people engage with it, the more they can see that it's beautiful land. I don't think people engage with it enough, simply because it is privately owned. The sort of work being done here, especially locking up the land under a covenant, is such a good thing, and hopefully it will kind of broaden the scope for more landowners to allow people onto their property to engage with these ecologies, to see the kind of diversity that's here, and start to recognise that, like any other wilderness type area in Tasmania, that it doesn't have to be kind of green and lush, and it can be a lot of things if it's dry, and this is a very dynamic and changeable landscape, so it's great to see.
I think we just need to take stock of what's around us and what's those things that we both find beautiful and nourishing to our daily lives. It might be the bettong popping across the lawn, or it might be the birds in your garden, or it might be the sound of water flowing across the rocks in your river, and it might be the leaves, the vigour of leaves in the trees and the flowering of the wattle and all those sort of things. Take stock of that and put a value on it. Give it not a monetary value, but remember it has a value that you can't live without, and that it's really easy to lose. It takes 30 to 60 years to grow a tree, and you just go and cut it down. You don't, by planting a tree, you will not be alive to see another one like it, and so it's like pushing over a house that was 30 years old because a bigger one can go in its place, but you can't build a bigger one. It takes another 60 years before you see that tree replaced, and that's probably